want to start this rumination by discussing the concept of jank. Jank is hard to explain unless you know it, of course, unless you've seen it, in which case you're just like, oh yeah, it's, of course. But some people, and including myself, tend to have the bad habit of associating jank with bad. Now, it's obvious why, because jank is, generally speaking, a negative multiplier on top of a video game, right? And there are plenty of games that are janky that are not good as a consequence. But jank does not necessarily mean bad. I actually have an example prepped for you. There's a game series called Trine, which is a perfect example of a series of games where the jank actually adds to the enjoyment of the games. Being able to have a game where you're running through and you, oh god, you accidentally shoved me up against the spikes. Why would you do that? Is a good example of something you didn't mean to do, but you did it because the game was pretty janky. That leads us to Banjo Tooie, still firmly in the jank block. Now, I was dreading this one, I'll admit it, because I didn't super care for Banjo-Kazooie, but most of my complaints about Banjo-Kazooie boiled down to a combination of jank, the controls being the primary thing, but also just there were a lot of older game design decisions which were just really frustrating and irritating. A lot of those have been smoothed over in this game, in Banjo-Tooie, and so a lot of that complaint and frustration, that irritation of playing is just gone. And instead, it's just a much more smoother experience. So is Banjo-Tooie a better game? So let's start on the story axis, such as it is. The first comparison I want to make is to Monkey Island. Anybody familiar with that series? I'm sure at least some of you are. Monkey Island 1. How many of you think Monkey Island 1 is funny? I will raise my hand on that one. How many of you think Monkey Island 2 is funny? Now, I actually commented on this during my rumination of both games, like a year or two ago or something like that. I forget how long it's been, but it's been a little bit. Because Monkey Island 2's humorous style was much more 90s. I don't really have a better way to put it. There's a sort of forced awkwardness to it, and it leans very heavily on crudeness and rudeness and meanness. And those three things, which was a really common trend in a lot of 90s fiction, because 90s, right? I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about, even if you don't specifically associate it there too. Which leads me to this game. Now, I know this game came out in 2000, even though it was supposed to come out in 1999, but this game very much feels 90s in its overall approach and style with the story. Put simply, this game never made me laugh. Not once. Whereas Banjo-Kazooie did. So Banjo-Kazooie is better in the story axis. I do also have to comment on the fact that Kazooie, like it starts as a meme, right? Where we're joking about, Kazooie's super evil, ha ha ha. And then she just does so many horribly evil things in this game. And we actually outright murder two innocent people throughout the course of the game. And it's just treated as like a whoops, sorry about that. And of course, it's Kazooie's idea at the end to, spoilers, kick around the Grunty's head as a kickball, just for laughs. Right. Anyways, but that's about all I have to say on the story axis. There's not much there. Although there is a very long opening cutscene and a fairly long ending cutscene. There's actually like 3. And that's pretty impressive. It probably took them a while to really set those up and get them running and yada, yada, yada. It is very impressive, especially for the time. And that's the next big watchword I have. We've already talked about the 90s tude. Let's talk about ambition. Banjo-Tooie is very obviously and very clearly very ambitious. For good and for bad. This game accomplishes things that I am astonished they were able to pull off in the year 2000, on the N64, for God's sakes. Never mind the puzzle, which is able to show the moving pieces of a shot of another level in the puzzle pieces as you're putting them in. Never mind the reflections, never mind, what else? I wrote the smooth transition between characters, the fact that there was going to be the stop and swap, which obviously had to be axed out because of time. There was going to be a boss control mode where you can run around and they had the Mario Odyssey idea years before Mario Odyssey came out. They couldn't get it working, but you have tons of different moves. You have tons of different ammo. You can carry different forms through zone lines with some limitations. So many of the levels actually interconnect, not just with themselves, but with the other levels. The ambition of this game is insanity. And the fact that they were able to accomplish all this is legitimately mind-boggling. There are some load time issues. In fact, we had some crash issues when we were getting this one running. So every time it would freeze up to load something, there was just this moment of, "No, okay, it's okay. It's just loading. It's just loading." But the ambition is definitely on display. I cannot believe what they accomplished with this, which leads me to the style of gameplay we had here. They really go for, it's not quite a full Metroidvania. I don't want to call it that because it's not. But it's definitely leaning far more Metroid and far less your typical collect-a-thon. Even though this is still a collect-a-thon, you are getting Jiggies. That's your primary goal. You get Jinjos to get Jiggies. You get various items to get Jiggies. And basically everything you collect, everything you gather, whether the Globros from Mumbo or Wumba, all of that is getting you to the goal of getting Jiggies in order to progress through the game. But the structure of the game, the actual design of it, feels a lot more Metroid-y. I mentioned the interconnecting levels thing. Oh, hey, that finally just finished. Sorry, speaking of tech issues, I actually had OBS fail to capture the video. I hope it's capturing right now. I'm going to double check just to make sure. Yep, we appear to still be recording. Good to know. I've just been having so many tech issues today. And I woke up sick on top of everything else, so I do apologize if I sound a little more nasally than usual. So, the way I want to describe it, a lot of people describe Metroid-y style gameplays as, you get abilities, you progress through it, yada, yada, yada. The way I want to describe it is the checklist. As I was playing through this game, and I would progress and explore, I would take the time and see what I could see, a checklist would slowly be building in my brain of what I have seen and what I can interact with. It's like, okay, this thing is over here, it's broken for some reason, so there's something there. This thing is over here. Not sure what's going on with this one. There's clearly a button over here that has this, banjo symbol on it. So I need to switch to just banjo for this symbol. And I would just make a mental checklist. There's actually technically two layers of it. There's the layer of I don't know what to do, and there's the layer of I do know what to do. And I'd get through these first, obviously, and then start working on these ones. Make sense? Now, I keep calling it Metroid-y, but honestly, I'm kind of building to a point. This game feels more Zelda-y than anything else, in terms of the actual structure and design of the core gameplay. Obviously, it's an action platformer and a collect-a-thon, but the way that you just go through and design and decide what you're going to do based on said design, that feels very Zelda to me. I'm curious if anybody else had a similar reaction as they were playing this, either now or as a kid or whenever you last played it. But it's good, it's fun, it's interesting, and one of the other things the game does, which I liked, and I know this is kind of a controversial thing, is I liked the fact that the game had a very nice flow to it. As you did, you would see or unlock. As you see things, you have more stuff for the checklist to do. As you unlock, you can do more stuff on the previous checklist. And so the game just did this constantly. It was this nonstop flow of accomplishing, which led you to new things, which led you accomplishing, which led you to new things. But it doesn't get a complete pass on that, because one of the problems with this game, one of the largest problems with this game, is the backtracking. Now, we've talked about backtracking before, and we've actually talked about backtracking a lot. Backtracking is kind of hard to pull off well. Sometimes you could do a narrative backtracking. Maybe as you're going back through an area, people are saying different things, or a story's progressing in the background. Maybe there's an NPC who's kind of developing as you go through it. Maybe the background terrain has changed, so you can see stuff has altered, like, oh my god, it's now on fire because the ship crashed, or something, right? Another way to do backtracking is on the gameplay axis. Maybe the area is the same, but you now have different abilities than you were last time. So you can go do this and this and this and this. So your path through it's not really backtracking because you're going through it differently. Either because you're going through it faster as like a shortcut thing, or because you're accessing new things. Maybe the terrain itself has changed because of stuff that's happened. So now you can access different things because those things weren't there before. Stuff like that. These are the core principles of how you can make backtracking interesting. And there's a lot of ways to branch out from that. And Metroids tend to do this very well for the most part. This game does it terribly. And it insists on backtracking in several cases. Probably the worst example by far, and this is related to another problem this game has, is there was a point at which I had to, let me try to make sure I have the whole process here. I had to get to Mumbo's place, go through a warp, walk over to this spot, use my magic, which revived the dude, and he's like, hey, go find my kids. Okay, so in order to find and interact with the kids, I have to be Banjo Kazooie. So I go back to the warp, back to his place, switch back to Banjo Kazooie, go back through the warp, go over here and open him up. And the first thing that happens is they say, hey, I need a doctor. So I now have to go back to the warp, back to Mumbo's place, back through the warp, back over, use the magic, back over, warp back to Mumbo's place, warp back as Banjo Kazooie, and now I can progress. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a common example of the kind of backtracking that exists within this game. It's straight up padding. Ironically, a lot of it has to do with Mumbo specifically, which leads me to my first critique, the thing that I would change. I would love it if you could just hit a button, you change into Mumbo. Now, you might think that would necessitate change in the level design, but I was thinking about this, and I don't think it actually would. It would lead to a situation where you might be able to soft lock yourself. I'm not going to lie about that, but you can always hit save and quit if that happens. The reason, though, is Mumbo doesn't really do much in the game. He's kind of lacking. He doesn't give you the transformations. He's a button. Mumbo is just a key. He serves the exact same function as a yellow key card in Doom. And that's it. You use him to activate a thing. It is Wumba and her transformations that are used to far greater effect. Those are awesome. Those give you new and different abilities and different ways to interact with the world around you, and that leads to all sorts of fun, awesome stuff, which you can do with that. But Mumbo is just the key, nothing more. So being able to just press that button would cut down a lot of that backtracking, because you could just switch to him when you need to, and then that was a terrible snap. There we go. And then switch back when you are no longer needing it, right? There's other examples of this. Let me give you another example, though, because the problem there, one of the problems there is there's a lot of the seconds in minutes problem in this game. I don't discuss that often, so forgive me for going into this in slight detail. For every minute of gameplay, there's a few seconds of just wasted time, padding. Usually this is by design. Usually this is done in order to make a game seem longer. The other works can do this too. Television can do this to make a runtime, and movies can do this to make the movie longer. But usually this is a gameplay thing. Taking a while to loot, or having to go through an animation to be able to interact with someone, or having to go through multiple steps of a menu every time you try to switch your equipment, for example. This is the seconds and minutes problem. It's not a huge complaint, but the longer a game is, the more it's a problem, because for every minute of playing the game, you have about 50 seconds of actual gameplay and then 10 seconds of pure padding. This game has a lot of that with the animations and with the very slow load times and with the fact that there's load screens everywhere. One of my viewers was making fun of this semi-regularly because every time you activate the train, it has to pause and load. And then it has to show a nice, long cutscene for the train, and then it's there and then you're done. And that has to happen every single time. It's not a big deal, but you can see why it adds up over time. That's why it's the seconds and minutes concept. So those two problems, they kind of made the game a little bit sloggier overall. This leads to the other major problem that this game had. And I just sort of said it. It's kind of sloggy. There's several long, lengthy sections of the game, which is just, okay. And you just play through gargantuan swaths of playstyle. At one point, I think we played through 3 hours and got a total of 1 jiggy in that entire period of time. Now, you can go ahead and blame me for being a terrible player or whatever. That's fine. But that is kind of how the levels are designed in many ways. Let me use another specific example of that, because the game kind of tricks you into wasting your time at points. There's one particular jiggy in Grunty Industries or whatever it is, the factory level. I'm sure some of you even know this one. You have to run around as the washing machine, which is awesome, and you have to clean off the rabbits, to make sure that their overalls are clean, right? You can get the first 4 of them pretty much right off the bat with a little bit of thought and care and effort. There is a bit of a padding thing before that to even unlock that, but let's ignore that for the moment. So you get the first 4, and when you get the 4th, the 5th is right there, visible. You can see the 5th guy, but you can't get him yet, unless there's some kind of trick or bug or speedrunning trick in order to do it. You are not supposed to be able to reach him. You are supposed to be able to go do several other things, get to the rooftop, do the entire rooftop section, go in the upper layer, use the drill thing to open up the screws, which lowers the thing, so now you can go and get the 5th one. Now, why is that tricking you? Because not only is he right there, but most players, just as an automatic process, if they're getting these, every single time it's like, hey, there's 4 more of me. Hey, there's 3 more of me. Hey, there's 2 more of me. And when you get the last guy, he's like, hey, there's 1 more guy. Can you go get the last guy? It's sort of our natural play style to automatically think that's what we're doing right now. Remember that checklist? Well, that checklist also has a priority. The top stuff at the top is what we're going for first, right? So I'm in the middle of this. I am currently in the washing machine, and the other guy's clearly right there. So there's something I have to be able to do. So what would happen under normal circumstances is I would waste however much time trying to get to him and failing because I can't. And the game pulls this particular trick often, where you're supposed to be able to do 30, 40, 80, 90% of a particular jiggy, and then leave it, and then come back substantially later in order to finish it off. That is a very common trick this game pulls. And it's mean for a game that is trying to encourage exploration so much by basically putting a barrier you can't bypass until you reach a certain arbitrary point further on in the game. My opinion. And that is why I hesitate so much to say if this game is better than Banjo-Kazooie. It has a really, really robust autosave. It keeps track of so much of the stuff you do very quickly and very effortlessly. It would be nice if I didn't literally lose my save to save corruption towards the end, but let's not get into that. My God. Anyways. And so, I don't want to go into the specific details, but there's a lot that this game does that makes it a lot more user-friendly than the first game. The game is substantially better than Banjo-Kazooie. But the content of that game, it's a little bit trickier. I am reminded of another game comparison. I've actually talked about this semi-recently, earlier this year. I compared Pokemon Black and White 1 to Pokemon Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield is a superior game, period. But Black and White 1 has superior content, period. Because Black and White 1 has all those old irritations that the old Pokemon games has, and Sword and Shield has smoothed over all that, but none of the fights or engagements or the design of which Pokemon you find when or which moves they get at which point and all that stuff. There's just not good design there. Whereas Black and White 1 was extremely well designed and had some of the best fights in the entire series. You see why I contrast these two, and why I just find myself with a question mark when someone asks which is better. I'm pretty sure Tooie will rate higher. I haven't actually done the math on that yet, because I have to run it through the golden number formula, which I can't do yet. But I find myself thinking it's more different than it is better or worse. Whether it is, if you want a game that has tighter level design and more interesting specific engagements and puzzles, you probably want the first game. If you want a game that doesn't make you want to tear your hair out, you probably want the second game. And the weird thing about this is all of this stuff, both good and bad, is most exemplified in the final boss. You get to the final boss, which is the tank, right? What was it called? The Hag 1. The Hag 1 tank, which has got a V10 engine, apparently. Although I don't think a V10 would actually make a tank that big, but whatever. So you're fighting that fight. Now, let's start off with the basics. That fight is awesome. The design of that fight, the lasers you have to jump over, the spinning, the drill, which you have to dodge, the fact that she pops off health every time you get her through a phase, of which there are 10. The fact that the health stays there permanently. There's just now a health there. So if you ever need that health, it's there. This is kind of the stuff I'm talking about. It's all little stuff. But there's a lot of little quality of life features like that in the whole game. Like I said, the final boss exemplifies it. So you got the health, and you've got the ammo power-ups, ammo refills all around the area if you need to refill your ammo. And she's got the missile attacks, and you go inside the tank, and you jump on the thing, and then you go to the Doom FPS section in order to dodge and weave through her attacks, and you got a quiz thing in order to make sure that she hits you faster or slower. It's a fun fight, ... which is very padding. It has a lot of padding and unnecessary seconds and minutes, because every time you fight her, you have to go through every single bit of dialogue that she says throughout this very long fight. And you have to slog your way through that text every time. There's no speeding it up and there's no skipping it, even though the game has the ability to track whether or not you fought a boss before or not. Because every boss in the game has a second bit of dialogue they say if you've died and then go back to fight them again. So they can track that. But they don't use that to make it so you don't have to see the constant bits of dialogue that you can't skip through or make go faster in this specific case. Because you just have to... So you're just like... And so for the first several minutes of this very long fight is just a slog every time you have to restart it before you can get back to the actual hard part. And you see what I mean by this, and why this is so frustrating. The final point I'm going to make here to really compare this game to the first game is there are skippable cutscenes in this game sometimes, which is impressive. There are times when you can just straight up skip a cutscene. You hit R and B, done, skip. And you can do that sometimes. And it looks like they manually placed the triggers for skipping, because there are some cutscenes you just can't skip, like the ones I was just mentioning in the final battle. And that's that game in a nutshell. It's better when it's better, and it's worse when it's worse. What did you think, and how did you enjoy it? I did enjoy it. It was better than the first game. It's right here. Hopefully we'll be able to put it on the shelf soon. I do hope you've enjoyed my thoughts, and I will see you all next time.